Live from Tel Aviv, I'm Clive Myrie on the day that Israel and America attacked Iran. Strikes in Tehran and right across the country. The Iranian Red Crescent says more than 200 people are dead, with more blasts reported this evening. The Iranians hit back, retaliating with a series of strikes across the region, also hitting Bahrain. Thousands are now caught up in the violence, including tourists across the Middle East. This was the scene in Dubai a little earlier after an Iranian strike on the Palm Hotel. And these are live pictures from here in Tel Aviv, where a state of emergency has been declared across Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there are signs the Iranian supreme leader is gone.
Today, in a very powerful surprise attack, we managed to destroy the compound of the tyrant Khamenei. All indications show that this tyrant is no longer with us as well.
Donald Trump said earlier that major combat operations were underway, and he had this message for the Iranian people.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
Hello to you. We're keeping an eye on Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, and we'll be live at Palm Beach with our correspondent for the very latest there, and possibly even reaction to what the Israelis are saying, which is that they believe that the supreme leader of Iran may well be dead. Let's first go to Hugo Bashega, who joins us now in Jerusalem. Hugo, first of all, we know that this is what the Israelis are saying when it comes to the supreme leader. Are you hearing any more on that?
Yeah, Clive. So minutes ago, we had a statement from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who went on television to say that the plan to destroy Israel is gone, and that there are growing signs that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is also gone. And after this statement, we've seen multiple reports in Israeli media quoting an Israeli official as saying that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is dead. Now, we don't have the confirmation of that, official confirmation. There hasn't been any kind of official statement by the Israeli authorities, but it does seem that the Israeli authorities at this hour are very confident that the supreme leader of Iran has been killed on this day, the day that marked this military operation of the US and Israel targeting sites across Iran. And obviously one of those sites hit was the compound used by the supreme leader in the capital, Tehran. So this coming just moments after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went on Israeli television to address the nation. And again, he called on the people of Iran to seize this opportunity to change the leadership in the country. So if a regime change, if you like, is not the main objective of one of the goals of this operation, is obviously a desire here of the Israeli Prime Minister and also of President Trump, who had a similar message earlier today, right after the beginning of this operation.
We know that that was the initial aim, Hugo, of the Israelis with that attack this morning, conducted, we understand, in daylight hours, because that is when perhaps the Iranian leadership might have felt that they were safer. If that is the case, is there a sense then that perhaps the Israelis have concluded their particular mission when it comes to Iran, and that perhaps it's the Americans who will be doing much more of the strikes as we go forward?
Yeah, we simply don't know. I think, if this information is confirmed, Clive, it shows the level of intelligence that the Israelis and possibly the Americans have about the leadership in Iran. We know that the Prime Minister had been defending the idea of a significant military operation against Iran. Today, again, he talked about what he described as the existential threat posed by Iran's nuclear program, something that the Prime Minister has been talking about for decades when describing the leadership in Iran, in particular the country's nuclear program. There were negotiations happening between the Iranians and the Americans. We still don't know whether the Americans were engaged in these talks with the goal to achieve a deal to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. But at the same time, the Prime Minister, most recently has also been talking about the threat posed by Iran's ballistic missiles. Now, I think the big question here is about what happens next if this information is confirmed. There have been reports suggesting there was a plan in place by the Iranian authorities. Obviously, over the last few weeks, we've heard threats from President Trump to attack Iran, leaks suggesting that he was contemplating a plan to strike the supreme leader himself, and also this huge military buildup in the Middle East, the largest American military buildup in the region since the US-led invasion of 2003. But if this information is confirmed, who is going to replace him and what kind of leadership is going to emerge in Iran? Obviously, a lot of people have been saying that it is not guaranteed that if there is a change in leadership in the country, there will be all of a sudden the opposition in place or democracy emerging in the country. So it will be interesting to see what is going to happen next, not only in Iran, but also in terms of this military operation by the Israelis and the Americans.
Yeah, very important development this evening. If those suggestions from the Israelis are true that the supreme leader is in fact dead. Hugo Bashega, live in Jerusalem. Thanks, Hugo. Let's get a word now from our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet, who joins us. Lise, you will have heard the suggestion from the Israelis that the supreme leader is dead. If that is the case, what does that mean in terms of this war?
It's an extraordinary moment for the Islamic Republic of Iran if it is confirmed. Even him coming under attack in the first hours of this major military operation, joint operation by Israel and America, was significant, the strikes against his residence. But if it is confirmed that he is dead, they have been preparing for this. We've had many, many reports from Tehran, especially after the 12-day war last year, where on the first night, June 13th, the Israelis were able to kill at least 9 nuclear scientists, assassinated security chiefs, and made it clear that the Ayatollah was in their sights, and therefore that Iran has been preparing for alternative security chiefs, but also for the succession. There have been reports that a very short list was drawn up that in the event that Ayatollah Khamenei was killed, that someone else would take his place. Now, in Iran, there is an institutional framework for that. There is the Assembly of Experts formed of senior clerics, many of them in their 80s, like Ayatollah Khamenei, and their sole job is to choose the next supreme leader. And there's been speculation for many years about who could take his place, including his son Mujtaba, the grandson of Iran's first revolutionary leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, who's seemed to have taken a much more prominent role of late. But Iran was prepared for this. And once they come out and confirm that he is dead, they will want to send a message to the world that everything is still in place, that there will be a smooth succession.
So the death of the supreme leader, if it's confirmed, Lise, that because the Iranians have been planning for this for many, many years, you're talking about continuity. You're talking about a continuation of the same attitude towards the West and the Americans that we've seen in recent years. Does targeting on the part of Israel, the supreme leader, actually not change anything?
Clive, at a moment like this, in a year like this, at a time like this, to use the word continuity suggests a normal time of this is not normal in any way. I was really struck on our last visit to Iran. Iran feels like a different country now. The ruling order is different. It's significantly weakened. The people are different. After last month's protests were put down with lethal force, killing many, many thousands. We felt the anger and the pain. It was really raw. This is an extraordinary time, and it's very difficult to say how it will unfold. It is, after all, only day one. Of course, it will be a huge jolt to the Islamic Republic, no matter how hard they try. And they will try hard to show that they have a system in place, because there is a system in place. And of course, in Islamic tradition, he will have to be buried soon after. And you can expect that there will be an outpouring of emotion, because he does have those, his followers, those in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, whose sole mandate since the Iranian Revolution of 1979 has been to protect the Islamic Republic. Those hardliners could become harder still, but it does open up a whole new game. People talk about the Venezuela example. Could there be, to use the word that Adelcy Rodriguez, could someone else emerge who may want to take a different tack? Whatever it is, their main objective, as it was the main objective of Ayatollah Khamenei, the red line is the survival of the regime, the survival of the Islamic Republic. Individuals can come and go, but what they want to preserve is their power, their control, their presence at the helm of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But all bets are off, given the way this military operation has unfolded, even in these early hours.
Sure thing, Lise. An extraordinary development at this hour, on a day of extraordinary developments. Lise Doucet, our chief international correspondent. It's always good to talk to you, Lise. Thank you for that. Well, the attack today follows weeks of tension right across this region, with US forces massing around Iran. Now, the country itself has launched a wave of retaliatory strikes right across the Middle East in response. Here's Jeremy Bowen, our international editor.
It is the biggest array of American power in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The Americans believe that this time their raw power can impose regime change on an enemy without creating a disaster. The removal of Iraq's Saddam Hussein in 2003 led to a catastrophe. Long years of war that incubated jihadist extremist movements that still exist. Israel and the US went back to war with Iran just after breakfast time in Tehran, hitting the capital and sites across the country. It's hard to get information about what's happening there. Video of an attack on a school in southern Iran is circulating. Iranian state TV was reporting 85 killed. This is a dangerous moment with unpredictable consequences in the world's most turbulent region. Israel said the whole operation is a preemptive attack without producing evidence of an imminent threat. Sirens sounded immediately in Israel. War is political, and this is a war of choice aimed at changing the regime in Iran.
Today, in a very powerful surprise attack, we managed to destroy the compound of the tyrant Khamenei. For 3.5 decades, this brutal and cruel tyrant who fought the entire world and made its own people miserable, was constantly trying to eradicate Israel. This plan no longer exists, and all indications show that this tyrant is no longer with us as well.
Satellite images show the destruction of the compound used by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The Iranians say he wasn't there when it was destroyed. Iran tried to deliver on its threat of a devastating response aimed at the extensive network of US bases in the Gulf. This was Qatar, as well as Israel.
Go, go, go! Get in, sorry.
In Dubai, tourists looking for winter sun had a nasty reminder of the region's realities. Close by in Bahrain, this appears to be a strike aimed at the big US naval base. Iran says it will use more powerful missiles than the ones it fired in last summer's war. An interceptor rocket went up. Iran will hope that as the days pass, the US and Israel will start running out of defensive missiles. In Tehran, regime supporters rallied around the flag. It would take more than killing the supreme leader to destroy the regime. It has a complex political system underpinned by ideology, corruption, and the ruthless use of force against dissent. In January, big protests against the regime and the economic crisis were crushed with live bullets that killed thousands of people. Donald Trump promised to protect them and seems to believe that the regime will fall if they try again after America and Israel's onslaught.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond.
At dusk, the Fairmont Hotel on Dubai's Palm was hit. It isn't clear if it was targeted or if this was caused by missile debris from an interception. The fire took hold. And this was Bahrain. More devastation. Iran has a big arsenal of accurate short-range missiles. Iran's leaders will now be calculating how to ride out the war, how to survive, and how to manage its consequences. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Well, some of those missiles fired by Israel hit the presidential palace. And as we've been hearing, there were strikes around the supreme leader's compound. And the suggestion is from the Israelis that he is now dead. Iranian media is reporting that at least 53 people have been killed in the city of Minab in the south of the country too. Now, Baran Abbasi from the BBC's Persian service has a report for you, a warning. It does contain some distressing images.
Panic on the streets of Tehran around 9:40 a.m., a working day in Iran, when loud explosions were heard across the country.
War has started near our office down in Palestine Street. All the buildings were shaking. The streets are full of terrified people.
At the same time, a sense of relief for some. A woman cries out in joy, says the Supreme Leader's office was hit. And at this school, teenagers celebrate. In early January, shocking pictures were shared with the world of thousands of people killed when government forces opened fire on protesters calling for regime change. The brutality left many believing only military intervention could topple the regime. But public sentiment could shift sharply if civilians are killed in the attacks. Many Iranians reacted with anger after state media reported that an Israeli strike on a girls' school killed dozens.
The first victims of this war are girls in Minab, hit by a missile attack. Is this the war you cheer for?
A mixture of emotions. For some, a fear that more violence is yet to come. For others, a sense that the regime's hold could finally be challenged. In a country scarred by months of protest and deadly crackdowns, uncertainty reigns. As the smoke clears, Iranians are left to face the consequences and to hope for a future beyond fear. Baran Abbasi, BBC News.
Baran joins us now. I just want to pick up on the suggestion from the Israelis, Baran, about the possibility that the supreme leader has been killed, has died in one of those airstrikes. What do you think the initial response will be of the people of Iran?
We have had a response from the office of the Supreme Leader saying that this is the psychological warfare and that this is being done by the enemy to discourage the people of Iran and disappoint them. So this is the latest that we are getting. But the satellite pictures that we saw from the compound of the leader earlier, it showed significant damage. And a few hours earlier, State TV has said that they will actually broadcast a statement, a video statement by the Supreme Leader, but it never came. So we haven't had any confirmation that he is alive, but his office is saying that reports about him being killed is psychological warfare. But on the part of the Iranian people, many would welcome this news if it's confirmed. He was ruling Iran with an iron fist for over 3 decades. He was the longest ruling leader of Iran after the former Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, and he was the longest ruling head of state in the Middle East, and his reign was marred by repeated crackdowns on peaceful protesters. He had the final say in all state matters and was responsible ultimately for the killing of thousands of innocent people and putting in prison a lot of people who just were calling for an ordinary life. And he was surrounded by hardliners and was against any kind of reform inside of Iran. And he was also very anti-West. And during his reign, Iran was isolated and was suffering under sanctions. So for a lot of Iranians, this would be welcome news.
Indeed. I mean, it's difficult getting information out. Obviously, communications are tricky. But I just wonder if you've got any sense, Bahrain, of what the situation is on the ground now in some of the major cities. In the capital, of course, Tehran. Are people sheltering in their homes? There clearly will be fear and dread about what the next few hours and days and weeks might bring.
Absolutely. People are really confused and worried, but there is also a sense of relief and celebration by those who have been asking for regime change. But the main worry is that the people were not prepared for this kind of situation, and they are complaining that the internet is down almost completely, and also phone lines are down. People are not able to contact each other. They don't know where to go, where to hide. There are no shelters, and the government have not prepared them for this situation. A lot of them say that even if people are being killed on the streets, apart from the responsibility that falls on the Israeli and American strikes, it's also the regime that inside of Iran that's responsible, because they have failed to protect their own civilians. There are people who are welcoming airstrikes as long as it leads to regime change and the killing of officials, because they believe that it's the only way for the people to have any kind of change inside the country. Only a few weeks ago, thousands of unarmed protesters were killed on the streets because they were calling for the downfall of the regime, and this is just the latest round of protests. Even if since early 2000s, people have been calling for reform, and it has been met with brutal crackdowns. So some of them believe that it's the only way for regime change.
Indeed, a very difficult and dangerous situation for many millions of ordinary Iranians. Many thanks to you. It's good to talk to you, Bahrain Abbasi there from the BBC Persian Service. Thank you. Well, Frank Gardner is our security correspondent, and he reports now on how the military firepower weighs up between the US and Iran.
The US has deployed its biggest assembly of firepower in the Middle East in decades. 2 carrier strike groups and over 200 warplanes, enough to sustain hundreds of air and missile strikes on targets in Iran for days, maybe weeks. Israel's Air Force has also been in action, firing the first shots this morning. It's shown it can overcome Iran's air defences. On paper, this is a very uneven fight, the US and Israel against a weakened and unpopular regime in Iran. But that regime has been surprisingly resilient, despite having almost no air force to speak of, and it's been hitting back with whatever weapons it still has. It has a lot of missiles, and it's been firing them at its Gulf Arab neighbours all day. Iran says it's just using up old stock, that it's keeping back some nasty surprises for the US and Israel.
Don't forget Israel is a part of all this, and what we know is that Israel doesn't want a negotiated solution. It wants Iran's missile capacity eliminated, and it also wants regime change because it feels as long as this regime's in power, that's an existential threat to Israel.
Iran has announced it's closing the Strait of Hormuz, potentially choking off a key shipping route for global oil and gas exports. And this AI propaganda video, made by the Revolutionary Guards, imagines a mass drone and missile attack crippling a US aircraft carrier. That is still an aim, and it's still a nightmare for the Pentagon. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
Let's go across now to the White House and our chief presenter, Katrina Perry, who's there for us now. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Clive. Well, President Trump is in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a flurry of activity here at the White House. And in fact, some of President Trump's senior officials have been briefing the media. They've held a briefing call to give a little bit of background as to just what went into the thinking, the lead up to those strikes that took place beginning at 1:15 in the morning here on the east coast of the US, 6:15 in the UK. And basically the top line out of that is that the president and the administration concluded, they said that diplomacy was not a tangible and realistic option when it came to dealing with Iran anymore. They said they had concluded that the Iranians posed such a threat to the US that they needed to act preemptively at this point. And the president wasn't going to, he said, sit back and wait for Iran to make the first move. He said they had become frustrated with the lack of progress on those talks. They used the words unwillingness from Iran to address some of the key issues, particularly around ballistic missiles. Of course, the US wanted these talks to extend not just to nuclear capabilities, but also to their ballistic missiles capabilities. And they said that Iran just simply wouldn't entertain that concept. They wanted to focus simply on nuclear buildup. And they also were told from those senior administration officials that Iran refused to address the issue of their proxies in the region. And putting all of those aspects together, President Trump took the decision last night that he was going to take this action. Now, he, as I say, is in Mar-a-Lago, so he was in the secure sort of off-site situation room that they have in Mar-a-Lago. And here at the White House last night, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, was here, the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, were here, as was Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. And they all linked up by a secure line from here to Mar-a-Lago in Florida to make that decision to start those strikes in conjunction with Israel, as well, as you've been hearing a little bit earlier. But let's talk a little bit more now about just what we are hearing from the administration as to what's happened and what is still happening. Of course, the president talking about this being a multi-day operation. I'm joined here at the White House by our North America editor, Sarah Smith. Sarah, we're just learning a little bit more about the thinking and how we went from a position yesterday of talks ongoing, hearing from the Omanis that progress, in fact, is being made, to where we ended up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, so the administration officials have been saying they concluded the Iranians were not serious about this and that they were playing for time because the regime is particularly weak at the moment. They thought they were going to try and spin out these negotiations as long as they could while they try and regroup. It is clear they didn't think there was an imminent danger of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, not least, of course, because of the US attacks on their nuclear program last year. They are still a long way from doing that, but what we're being told is that the US had assessed that there was also a significant threat from Iran's conventional weapons, from the ballistic missiles it has, that they were refusing to talk about in those negotiations, and that's why they felt compelled to take action. But we've not yet, I don't think, heard a really compelling case as to what the imminent danger to the US was that President Trump can use to justify to his voters the scale of this attack that he's launched on Iran.
Because he sort of tried to set that case out at the beginning of that 8-minute video that he posted, but not any particular detail that's going to satisfy those who are looking for it, not least the lawmakers not too far from here in Capitol Hill.
Yes, exactly. He talked about their menacing activities, Iran, and that they posed a threat to US troops in the region and US allies, but without giving any concrete example as to what the threat was or why the timing is now. So a lot of people are assuming it is the weakness of the Iranian regime that gave Donald Trump an opportunity to strike rather than it being a necessity to strike at this point.
Now, we haven't heard from President Trump on camera today. Perhaps we will later. Who knows? He has a few engagements at Mar-a-Lago later. He has, however, been speaking to some journalists by telephone, most recently Axios. He had a 5-minute phone call with them, and I'm told he said he has several off-ramps. He could either go long and take over the whole thing, presumably he means all of Iran, or end it in 2 or 3 days. Again, it's talking about these off-ramps, which are not clear at this point.
Yes, and so what he seems to be saying there is if he was going to end it in 2 or 3 days, that would be if the Iranian regime had agreed to some of the demands he was making in these earlier negotiations, which would be to get rid of their nuclear program and their conventional ballistic weapons. If they were to say that, what he seems to be intimating is that he could then stop attacking Iran if he got what he wanted, or as you say, he could go long and take over the whole thing. Well, that's regime change, and we heard him in his statement saying to the Iranian people, now is your opportunity to seize control. It's pretty clear he has no plans for putting troops on the ground or trying to force regime change that way. But if he is talking about going long and taking over the whole thing, it sounds as though there is a plan for a pretty sustained campaign.
We've already seen a sizable protest outside the White House here today from anti-war protesters who are against this action. And that part of the president's statement overnight saying there is a risk to American military members here, it's going to be very hard for him to sell that to the American people.
Yeah, because he hasn't really made a sustained case for why this is necessary now. He has warned repeatedly over the last few weeks that if Iran didn't do a deal in these negotiations, then there was the possibility of an attack. But I don't think he has primed the American people for the scale of this or the potential losses. I mean, it was less than a week ago he delivered his annual State of the Union address. There was no mention of this. You would not get the impression from listening to that speech that he was preparing for something on this scale, and that the American people just, I don't think, have been given to understand why something like this is necessary now. And given that this is a president who promised no more foreign wars and has railed against regime change in Iraq and in Afghanistan in the past, it's going to be quite difficult, I think, for him to justify to his own supporters what he's doing now.
And indeed, that is the line that's always put back to him by his supporters and his opposers as well. Sarah, thank you very much for that. As I say, President Trump is in Mar-a-Lago. He does have 2 public engagements later on at his residence there. We may hear from him, who knows, but there are these briefings going on with very senior level representatives from within his administration. They're also due to speak to Republicans and Democrats, to the lawmakers who really are seeking questions from him on just what was the thinking behind the decision to initiate these strikes. So we'll have more on that for you through the day. Back to you, Clive.
Katrina, thank you for that. Katrina Perry there at the White House. Well, Iranian state media has been reporting that an attack has been launched on Dubai. Now, it's not clear exactly what Iran was targeting, but there is a US military presence in the country. The UAE Ministry of Defense has said it has intercepted a new wave of Iranian missiles and drones. That's according to reports from the Emirates news agency, cited by the Reuters news agency. Lee Milner has the latest.
This social media footage shows the entrance of a world-famous Dubai hotel on fire following an Iranian air attack, as the Tehran regime retaliates to a series of US and Israeli attacks. Black smoke can be seen billowing across the skyline after the Fairmont, the Palm Hotel, was struck by a missile. 4 people were injured. More than 1 million people from Britain visit Dubai each year. The UK Foreign Office has warned citizens in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates to immediately find shelter.
It's been really, really shocking, and then it's kind of built up over the day, and unfortunately debris has landed on the Palm, which is about a mile away from where I live, and I actually could see from my balcony the black plume of smoke rise, As the object hit the ground, it burst into flames, as we later saw, and then I saw that black plume rise.
Hundreds of thousands of airline passengers have had their travel plans thrown into disarray after several major carriers, including British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Airways and Wizz Air, cancelled their flights to the Middle East. London Heathrow, the UK's busiest airport, is urging travellers to check with their airline for updates as the conflict in the Middle East continues. Lee Milner, BBC News.
So what has been the response from the Iranian leadership to everything that's been going on? A little earlier, Lise Doucet spoke to the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghei, who's in Tehran, and she brought us a little bit of that interview, including the response to the idea that Iran's retaliation on its Arab allies could be a problem.
It is not retaliation. It is an act of self-defense recognized under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Secondly, we have not attacked any country. They are all our friends. What we have done, we have defended against an action by the United States. And we all know that in accordance with international, no country is allowed to let other countries, to let the aggressor abuse or use its facilities, its soil, in order to attack another country. What we are doing is defending our national territory, our sovereignty against an act of aggression. And we all know that those bases, those military bases which are under full control of the United States, are being used to conduct military attack against Iran.
But that's not how your allies are seeing it. As I mentioned, they have issued a statement condemning your attacks. The Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has been on the telephone to all of these capitals. What are they telling you?
Yes, that's why we really value our friendship with the countries of the region. That's why the diplomatic process that was betrayed by the United States just recently started in the region. The countries of the region were involved in this process because everyone understands that the security of the region, security of all countries of the region are interrelated, interconnected. And what matters most is that the countries of the region understand that the main threat to our collective security, to the future of the security of this region, is Israel, which is talking about the greater Israel. And now the United States is being dragged into its war of aggression against the whole region. So this is not only against Iran, this is against the whole region.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson there, Esmail Baghei, talking to Lise, and we're going to get a final word from Lise Doucet in a moment. But I just want to bring you the moment the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, addressed the people of this country, of Israel, and made that announcement about Iran's supreme leader.
Today, in a very powerful surprise attack, we managed to destroy the compound of the tyrant Khamenei. For 3.5 decades, this brutal and cruel tyrant who fought the entire world and made its own people miserable, was constantly trying to eradicate Israel. This plan no longer exists, and all indications show that this tyrant is no longer with us as well.
Let's talk to Lise Doucet once again. Lise, you were in Iran not long ago, and we know that there was a huge buildup of American military assets in the region. This attack, was it something you were hearing possibly from ordinary people that perhaps was expected, that could come?
Well, let me go even further back, Clive. We arrived last year, the day of the ceasefire, in what has become known as the 12-day war last year between Israel and Iran, which drew in the United States, and not a single person we met on that visit to Iran, which took us to other cities as well. All the Iranians we spoke to, whether or not they supported the government or not, believed that the ceasefire would not hold, that there would be another conflict between Israel and Iran, which would draw in the United States. And when we were in Iran this month, you felt, first of all, people were reeling from all of the pressures upon them, the spiraling inflation, the collapse of the currency, water shortages, electricity shortages, and the pain over the protests last month, which had been put down with such lethal force, killing many thousands. That anger and pain was still raw. And for the first time ever in Iran, Iranians said to us, as long as when they knew their identity was safe, they would say that no one wants their country to come under attack, but we believe now this is the only way that we can bring about change, is that we need an external intervention. That wasn't everyone, but there were many who did say that. Others, of course, were very anxious, that when they had so many worries on their mind, and having seen what happened last year, they feared what could happen again. And I think we saw some of the videos today, people running in a panic when the explosions, the loud explosions sounded in the morning, just after breakfast hours in Tehran and in other cities. So Iran, and that there was also this feeling that Iranians feel that the decisions about their lives are held by the powerful in their country, by the powerful in Washington and in Israel and in many places around the world, and they're just spectators. But daring to hope that that whatever comes next will be better than what they're living in now.
That's a really important point you make, Lise, about the perception that perhaps they're feeling they're spectators. But before I go on to that question, let's just go to the IDF headquarters, where I think a press conference is taking place.
Get rid of it, and it will last as long as it lasts. And let me just say to you that protecting the citizens of the State of Israel and the State of Israel is made up of three components. First of all, our air defense systems, which are the best in the world. The second, and just as important component, is these attacks, these strikes by the Air Force, as we're speaking, taking place all over Iran. And now the American Air Force has joined them, and they are targeting all the surface-to-surface missiles. And the third component is the behavior of civilians. Adhering to the instructions of the Homefront Command will help save lives. Together we will overcome all these difficulties. Channel 14 News, is there a projection that Israeli citizens will be targeted in other countries? Look, this has been a war in several arenas for over 2.5 years, and now we are prepared in both closer and more remote circles, and we will strike fiercely against anybody who will target us. Push News, are we preparing for other arenas, and will the IDF attack in Yemen if the Houthis will join the campaign? As I've told you, we are already accustomed to this kind of war with several arenas. We are keeping our eyes open and strictly monitoring. If we are attacked, we will retaliate fiercely. Yemen have launched missiles at us in the past, and we have retaliated fiercely, and we will do it again if necessary. Thank you very much, and have a good week.
So an Israeli defense spokesman there speaking live, making it clear that this conflict is going to go on as long as it needs to. Some suggestions from the Israelis that the supreme leader has been killed in that initial airstrike this morning. Still no confirmation of that, but that's certainly been the indication from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And as I speak to you now, the skies above Tel Aviv here are quiet. In fact, it's been the longest period of quiet we've had all day on what has been a momentous day here in the Middle East. You've been watching a BBC News special. I'm Clive Myrie. Goodbye.